Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. Now that we've started to get a proper look at the upcoming World Eaters release for Warhammer 40k, it's safe to say that it won't be long before players' thoughts turn to the obvious noise marine in the room, that being the inevitable release of Codex Emperor's Children and a new range of models to go with it. But before I go on, I should say that while new Emperor's Children are inevitable, since Khorne, Nurgle and Tzeentch's legions have all got or are about to get their own codexes, it will be a long time before we actually see them. But regardless of timing, I figured that with World Eaters still a few months away, it might be good to get ahead of the pack and talk about which new models I think might accompany a new Emperor's Children release eventually. And if you happen to be interested in hearing my thoughts about what could be coming with the impending World Eaters release, there's a video for that too. But with all that said, let's dive right in. So as with my World Eaters video, I will say that there are some very obvious models coming alongside Codex Emperor's Children. Fulgrim is a given, and you can hear more about what I think he'll look like in my video about the new Angron model. We'll also likely get a specialised Terminator unit, which will no doubt be a sublimely grotesque spin on the Phoenix Terminators, the chosen bodyguard of Fulgrim during the time of the Horus Heresy. I think we'll also see a new Lucius the Eternal model. As a classic champion of Slaanesh, he's a top pick for getting a new buffed up profile, and that will likely call for a new model too, which is apt given that it's now one of the oldest models in the Chaos Space Marine range. Noise Marines will certainly get a brand new release, something which I feel has kind of been confirmed by GW in so much that in the new Chaos Space Marine Codex, where Emperor's Children currently sit for now, the picture profile for Noise Marines is actually the classic Guitar Marine. It's a funny reference, sure, but I think there's a little bit of embarrassment there too. And we can perhaps expect a new cultist unit as well. With Thousand Sons having Zangors and Death Guard having Poxwalkers, I think confirmation of a special Slaaneshi cultist unit will actually come if and when we see one for World Eaters, and I think that's likely. As I've said before, when it comes to these specialised legions, the bog standard cultists, however new and cool they are, can feel a bit vanilla, and I can't see why the Emperor's Children should miss out if the other 3 dedicated legions get their own cultist following. So those are what I would consider safe bets for a new range of Emperor's Children models, and to be fair, that might be all we get. The Thousand Sons are pretty slim on the range front, so GW could keep it lean here too. But that being said, what might we hope to expect with a more extensive range, or to put it another way, what Emperor's Children models might follow the initial wave of releases? That's what I want to answer here, and before I go on, I would love to hear your thoughts, ideas and suggestions in the comments below. Kicking off my predictions is a spin on a classic Horus Heresy unit, the Palatine Blade Squad. You may recall from characters like Lucius that the Emperor's Children have always had an affinity for swordsmanship, and the Palatine Blades reflected that most clearly. They were a warrior fraternity of swordsmen, often operating outside of the main command structure and serving as a shining example of the martial perfection that the entire legion strived for. As you can guess, they typically went into combat with a mix of bladed weapons, from the Charnabal sabres to the Phoenix rapiers and power spears. The Horus Heresy has produced some incredible models for them, so good in fact that they make me wonder what a corrupted incarnation of the unit might look like in Warhammer 40k and how useful they could be. Up to this point, I've suggested new Terminators, Noise Marines and Cultists, but that would leave a big gap for a dedicated combat unit, and the Palatine offer a great template for something to fill that gap. Given the obsessive perfection with which the Palatine Blades pursued their craft, I can also see their brethren embracing any depraved dogmatic or corruption to become better swordsmen, and that can manifest into a really cool variation of the Possessed for the Emperor's Children, or perhaps just a fun close combat variant of Noise Marines. They could also be a great flavour unit to accompany any new Lucius model, serving as an honour guard or maybe just a perfect illustration of what has become of the Emperor's Children's most elite warriors, as Lucius and Fulgrim have driven them ever further into depravity. But putting the Palatine aside for a moment, one of the best things about the Emperor's Children is their range of sonic weaponry, blasting their enemies with highly concentrated sound waves and inflicting everything from significant discomfort to complete obliteration. And up until now, we've seen those weapons brought to life largely thanks to some incredible artwork of the Noise Marines, presenting them as intricate, otherworldly instruments that harbour a horrifying potential for destruction, very much like the Legion itself. But when you look at the rules that GW has given these mighty weapons, they don't seem all that potent. Blastmasters are great, but you only get one of those per unit. The Sonic Blasters, on the other hand, these horrifying warp-fused weapons of nightmare that you often see in the artwork, are really just only slight improvements on auto bolt rifles. Personally, I feel that Noise Marines have been given a bit of a pass with 9th edition since they're probably not flying off the shelves right now, but the point I'm trying to make is that sonic weapons are meant to be utterly devastating. We see that in so many of the Horus Heresy novels, but it doesn't feel like that with their rules. Now, I'm sure that when the Emperor's Children are finally released, we'll see a much needed buff to sonic weapons. However, I also think we'll see sonic weapons taken even further, to new extremes that show the Legion's reputation for indulgent experimentation and insane brutality in equal measure. To that end, I hope we get a variation of the Chaos Space Marine Havocs that show us just how inventive the armourers and weaponsmiths of the Legion have been over the last 10,000 years. After all, in the early stages of the Horus Heresy, apothecaries like Fabius Bile were experimenting with all manner of xenotechnology and forbidden science to create the most potent weapons possible and to further hone their brothers' skills in the art of war, however horrifying that was becoming. If that led to proto-sonic weapons in the space of a few Terran years, what might another 10,000 lead to? I think GW might just answer that, and it could put sonic weapons on the list of things to truly fear, regardless of whether you're facing hordes of Tyranids or mass formations of tanks. And to add a bit more spice to this particular idea, there's another unit from the Horus Heresy called the Cacophony, who, much akin to Proto-Noise Marines, wielded powerful sonic weapons. The twist, however, was that these weapons not only tore apart flesh and steel, but they also opened up the minds of their victims to the innumerable horrors of the warp. That's something we may see once again in the 41st millennium all too soon. Now, I want to stick with sonic weapons for this next idea, and it's one I'm pulling straight out of the Horus Heresy book Saturnine, which portrayed the height of the siege of the Imperial Palace on Terra by the traitor Primarchs and their legions, which included Fulgrim and his Emperor's Children. I won't go into spoilers other than to say the audiobook for Saturnine is fantastic, and that it was Fulgrim who was tasked with breaking the titular Saturnine Gate. This was a monumental undertaking to say the least, and to assist him he was given 3 Donjon pattern siege engines. These engines were essentially walking aircraft carriers, each mounted on 4 Warlord Titan class legs and bristling with weapons and attack craft. So, Fulgrim being Fulgrim, he decided to indulge himself and strap as much sonic weaponry as he could to each one, turning them into even more titanic engines of destruction. I'll spare you any spoilers, but hearing about these siege engines really got me thinking about what sonic weapons might look like on vehicles in the smaller scale of Warhammer 40k. To be fair, that might have been something in older versions of Warhammer or games like Epic, but it's not something that I can recall seeing since I started Warhammer back in 3rd edition. But what might those sorts of vehicles look like? Well, when it comes to Chaos, anything is possible, but I think we can glean a hint from some of the new Death Guard units that came with their relaunch in 8th edition, namely the Blight Haulers and Plague Burst Crawlers. These were completely new additions to the range and show how a mobile weapons platform and heavier siege vehicle can look when given that distinctive Legion vibe and a dash of the demonic. Basically, take something like these, give it a much more Slaneshi appearance and strap some sonic weapons to it, and I think that's what may come with the new Emperor's Children range. And it's not just because I want to see more sonic weapons. Given that Fabius Bile, Lucius and Noise Marines make up the entire Emperor's Children range right now, it's pretty clear that they're going to need some new vehicles too. And Games Workshop is unlikely to lean on the older, practically retired Predator and Land Raider sprues for that, not when everyone else is getting largely new stuff, so expect to see some brand new heavy armour being announced when the Codex does finally arrive. And very lastly, my final suggestion is actually a character. As I mentioned a moment ago, we already have 2 Emperor's Children characters, Fabius Bile and Lucius the Eternal, and when Fulgrim joins the pack, it will mean that the Emperor's Children will already have more named characters than any other dedicated legion, which tend to have 2. But going back to the Horus Heresy for a second, the Emperor's Children, like almost all the legions back then, had some really great compelling characters, and in my mind, one of the most intriguing is Lord Commander Eidolon. Eidolon was a truly formidable commander during the time of the Horus Heresy, and one whose reputation was distinguished even beyond the warriors of the Emperor's Children. He was also exceptionally close to Fulgrim. The Primarch himself personally bestowed the rank of Company Commander to Eidolon, and his prowess soon saw him elevated to the rank of the Legion's preeminent Lord Commander. In so many ways, he was Fulgrim's second and his most capable warrior, and since the heresy there have been all manner of rumours as to what he may be up to. Some say he has managed to gather the largest and most disciplined force of Emperor's Children since their shattering, and others say that he has personally aligned himself with Abaddon the Despoiler. In fact, such is the infamy of Eidolon that the Inquisition keeps a sizable task force of warriors dedicated solely to hunting him down. But whatever the truth behind those rumours, I feel Eidolon is a perfect character to bring back to the Warhammer 40k fold, and it's not just because of his backstory and prowess, it's also because his presence may just serve as a superb catalyst for the next chapter in Warhammer 40k's story. When the Emperor's Children do finally arrive, they will no doubt do so with a bang. We'll see the same with Angron very soon, and that calls for the Emperor's Children to be united not only under a common purpose, but also under its supreme commanders. In essence, it would be a perfect stage for Eidolon to make his return and to once again serve his Legion and Primarch on the path toward their twisted sense of perfection. And yet there is one other reason why I think Eidolon would make a great addition to the Codex, and it's to do with his apparent fate. To make a long story very short, towards the climax of the Horus Heresy, Eidolon fell foul of Fulgrim's temper and ended up decapitated by the Primarch as punishment. However, thankfully, Fabius Bar was on hand to later reattach his head, leaving the Lord Commander in agonising pain, twitching and jerking constantly as he moved. He is, if the stories are true, one of Bile's greatest miracles and most embarrassing failures. But coupled with the more recent rumours of his renewed prowess, it does make me wonder how else he has transformed over the millennia. Has he embraced a more demonic form, or has his body suffered further ruin as chaos has consumed it and his mind? It's a question I'd love to see answered, and I'm confident the Warhammer design team are more than up to the challenge. So those are just a few of my ideas as to what could join Fulgrim in a new Emperor's Children release. Again, given the design cycles of these ranges, we're still some time off, so don't expect any announcements this year or perhaps even next. But seeing how the Noise Marine upgrade sprues and Lucius are almost constantly out of stock these days, it does give me some hope that GW is already working busily behind the scenes. But what would you love to see with a new Emperor's Children range, and is there a space on your shelf eagerly awaiting them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, a big thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel, and I do hope you'll join me for my next one. Until then though, do take care.